Hello people of YouTube, it's Deepak here, and welcome to DCS World 2.9.0 and Heat Blur Simulations AJS37 Viggen module. Welcome to Tutorial 5, Navigation. Today we're going to go over the basics of navigating in the Viggen, making use of the instruments and the different navigational outputs, how the navigational system works, how to make use of data cartridges and load flight plans, and how to edit those flight plans in the aircraft itself. For starters, we're going to go over the systems that the aircraft has for navigational purposes. The Viggen, being a slightly older aircraft, doesn't have modern systems like GPS and INS. It uses what for the time is quite advanced technology, but it's based on automatic dead reckoning. Now, this is basically automating the kinds of calculations that a human navigator would have done in the kind of World War II and post-World War II era, up until we had modern systems. So this means that you know the point from which you started in three-dimensional space, i.e. your takeoff airfield. The system has the exact coordinates of that location, and then from the point of takeoff, the flight data unit takes many inputs and uses those to calculate the new position of the aircraft based on those. Now, these inputs are things like the current attitude of the aircraft, its course, and its airspeed. It also takes measurements from accelerometers in order to calculate in the X and Y and Z axes how much the aircraft has moved from that initial position. And it does this many times per second. Now, this was the original system the aircraft had. As time went on, it had various upgrades, and one of those upgrades was the addition of TerraNav and Doppler nav systems. So the TerraNav system is a database of elevations for the area that the aircraft is operating in, and it can calculate, based on the altitude the aircraft thinks it currently is over the ground, whether that makes sense in the in the current situation. So it can compare the barometric altitude and the message it's getting from the radar altimeter and determine if it actually makes more sense for the aircraft to be, 10 meters to the right, 10 meters to the left, or whatever, based on its knowledge of the terrain underneath the aircraft. So this does automatic updates to the currently calculated position many times per second. You also then have the Doppler nav system, and the Doppler nav system is a radar facing downwards mounted in the right wing, and this is constantly computing the aircraft's X and Y axis movements based on its movement over the ground. This is very handy, of course, because it allows the ADR system to compensate for wind. And this is doing updates continuously as well. So ADR works out roughly where it thinks the aircraft is. That position is then refined by TerraNav and Doppler nav systems. You then also have the option to do manual fixes to update the aircraft's position, because even with these systems, the aircraft's position will drift over time, and these can be done either as overfly waypoints, or using the radar to take a fix and update the current position of the aircraft. So that's the basics of the system itself. Let's jump into the cockpit and take a quick look at how that's presented to the pilot. Okay, we find ourselves now in the cockpit of the Viggen, and I'm going to quickly go over the displays that we have associated with the navigational system and how to operate them. First though, I'll get the ground crew to connect ground electric power.
Chief, turn on the ground power.
And I can then boot up the aircraft and show you those systems.
Ground power is now on.
Okay, power is on. I'm going to flip the main electric power switch. All the displays will come to life. I'll cancel the master caution, and after a short delay we should hear the computer start to boot up. Don't know if that's a hard drive or an avionics fan or what, but you hear it spin up there. And after a short delay, the waypoint selector will come alive, the CK37 input window will come alive, and the ADI will start to align. That's when we know the computer is booted up. And that's happened now. We have the display, we have the currently selected waypoint, and ADI is erecting. So, with regards to the way that navigation indications are displayed, we of course have the HUD. And as I demonstrated on the takeoff video, on the HUD we have a reference dot, which will always show us the current bearing to our currently selected waypoint. We also have the altitude bars, which will help us fly our reference altitude. That defaults to 500 meters, but at any time we can press the reference button on our stick to set a new reference altitude. You then also have the fin on the flight path marker, and that's going to help us maintain a time on target. When the fin is above and detached from the body of the flight path marker, we are too fast. When it's attached, we're at just the right speed, and when it disappears inside the flight path marker, we are too slow. Looking at the ADI here on the left-hand side of the cockpit, we have yellow bars indicating heading that we should fly and the altitude. That helps us reference those in the ADI. We then have the central indicator. This acts as a kind of HSI, with the white triangle at the top showing us our current heading on the heading tape that goes around the edge, and then this yellow indicator at the bottom showing us the heading to our currently selected waypoint. We then have the currently selected waypoint indicated here in this window, currently LS, which stands for the takeoff airfield. Underneath that we have the distance to the currently selected waypoint, and then we have our fuel indicator. Important being the barber pole indication here, which shows us the minimum amount of fuel to complete the current flight plan in its entirety and then land the aircraft. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the data cartridges for the aircraft. I currently don't have one loaded. By default, your data cartridge will contain the waypoints that you created in the mission editor, or are part of the mission for your aircraft. If I bring up the kneeboard, you'll see that they're all indicated here on the kneeboard. I created waypoints B1 to B5. In the waypoint selector window and in the Viggen in general, anything that begins with a B is a waypoint. You can have waypoints 1 to 9 with a B in front. That's as many as the system can store. There are other types of point though, and we'll go over those in just a moment. If I flip through a few pages forwards though in the kneeboard, you'll see the currently selected data cartridge shown here. By default it will always be data cartridge 0, which comes from the mission editor. However, if I press and hold left control, left shift and press C, we can cycle to the next one. You can also have custom cartridges, which are created from Lua files, text files. Those are probably quite useful in multiplayer. I will demonstrate how to create those in another video. If I press left control and shift again, we then get to auto-generated data cartridges. The Viggen will always auto-generate cartridges based on potential targets on the map. So we have these auto-generated attack cartridges, there'll be multiple of them. And if I keep flipping through these, we'll also get to auto-generated search cartridges. These are based on radar sites that are on the map that we might want to do electronic intelligence gathering against, and it will create a flight plan automatically for those. And again, we've got a few of these automated ones created here, and then eventually we get to data cartridge 19. Now 19 will create a flight plan based on mark points on the F10 map. This is probably the most useful one for multiplayer, because of course in multiplayer you almost certainly don't have a pre-created flight plan, so you'll want to create this. If we go into the F10 map just now, I can very quickly create one of these for you. If I click on the mark label button on the top bar, and I drop down a mark label, and I give it an assignment based on what the aircraft expects, so B1 for waypoint 1, I'm going to drop another one now. I'll make this B2 for waypoint 2. I'll drop this one. This will be M3. Waypoints with an M in front are target points, so that's going to be my target. I'm going to define B4 here, and then lastly over here I'll make a B5. Okay, with all of those created, I can drop back to F1, I can open up the kneeboard, and you can see here that this automatic data cartridge based on the F10 map now contains 5 marks. And if I loaded that, I would get the mark points that I'd created in the F10 map. If I press Ctrl, Shift and C again, we'll go back to 0, back to the default one from the mission editor. Let's go ahead and quickly load that one now, and we'll go through what we can do with this. I'm going to insert the data cartridge, and then if I go back to my CK37, I'm going to switch to Ref Lola, I'm going to switch to input mode, and I'm going to enter the code 9er099er and press LS. Cartridge is now being loaded. 9 will flash, and then it zeros, and you'll notice the barber pole moved. The cartridge is now loaded. I can switch it back to output mode and back to actual position, and we're now ready to work with those points as loaded from the mission editor. Next, let's take a little look at what we can do with this flight plan now that it's been loaded into the aircraft. First thing to note, actually I'll go over the indications that you get in the selected waypoint window here. As I said, LS is your currently selected takeoff airfield. I have these push buttons here on the right console for the waypoints. If I press B1, then I get B1. You'll note that the steering indicator moves and the distance here to the target moves. B2, B3, 4, B5, those are all the waypoints that I had in the system. You can also have mark points. They'll be displayed as BX and then a number. You can have mark points numbered 1 to 5. I'll show you how to enter those in just a moment. There are also BX points 6 to 9, but they cannot be used for navigation. They are reserved for use by the RB-15 missile. You then also have 2 landing airfields, labelled L1 and L2. L1 is your primary landing airfield. You can select it by pressing the L MOAL button. First time I press it, I get L1. Second time I press it, I get L2, with L2 being my alternate. If I press the LS button down here, I'll get the takeoff airfield. You can also have M and then a number. Those are for target waypoints. Note that the target waypoints and the normal waypoints are the same. You can simply flip the mode between normal waypoints and target waypoints. As such, the same restriction applies. You can only have a total of 9 waypoints, including target waypoints. You then also have pop-up points. Each target point can have a pop-up point defined using polar coordinates, i.e. a heading from and a distance to. This allows you to define basically a heading from which you would like to attack a particular waypoint, and it will enforce that. The system will automatically navigate you to the pop-up point first, and then navigate you to your selected target. And that is, in fact, all of the default ones. There are some additional indications, but they're specific to recon missions, and we'll cover them in a different video when I cover reconnaissance. So, next thing we're going to show you is how you could enter additional waypoints manually. We have 5 waypoints as part of this flight plan, and I would like to enter a waypoint 6. Now, important things to note, in the Viggen, latitudes and longitudes are reversed. You enter the longitude or the easting first, and then the longitude, or northing in this case. They're in 6-digit classic degree, minutes, seconds format, so just be aware of that. With the master mode set to Ref Lola, we can confirm what each of our waypoints currently is. I currently have LS selected, and it's displaying the reference number for my airfield, 90044. If we select one of the waypoints, it will, however, display the longitude and latitude, and it will flip back and forth between those. So that's the easting, that's the northing. And it will continue to do that. I can select any of these waypoints and it will display their coordinates in the window. If I select one that hasn't been set yet, it will show zeros. So I'm going to go ahead and enter this one now. So in Ref Lola mode, I can switch to input. And in input mode, I'm going to enter the easting first, which is 3, 2, 5, 3, 4, 8. You'll note the display now blanks and it's ready for the northing. I'm going to enter 3, 4, 3, 9er, 0, 9er. It will now flip back and forth between those sets of coordinates. Once I'm happy with this, I can press the waypoint I want to store it in this case B6. The display will now blank, and I can go back to output mode and back to actual position. You need to be in actual position mode to select a waypoint. I'm now going to select B6. You'll note that it appears on the display, I get a heading and I get a distance. That was successfully entered. If I press B7, nothing happens. There's no 7, 8 or 9 in this flight plan. So that's how you do that. I'm also going to create a mark point. Now, an important thing to note is the B points and the target points, they are calculated as the full flight plan, and they're used for fuel calculations. Mark points are not. They're reference locations that you can fly to, and you can measure your distance and bearing to, but they will not impact your flight plan for the purposes of fuel planning. So once again, I go to Ref Lola Master Mode, I switch to Input, and I'm going to enter a separate set of coordinates for this one. So 3, 2, 5, 2, 2, 1, 3, 4, 4, 7, 4, 5. I now press the BX button, which is for mark points. Notice that nothing happens, my display is still illuminated because I now need to press a button, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. I'm going to press 1 to make mark point 1, and note the display now blanks. I'm going to go back to actual position, back to output mode, and now I'm going to press BX 1. You'll see that I get BX1 and the distance is displayed. As I said before, this does not impact the flight plan, this will not automatically be selected. I can press LS to go back to my takeoff airfield. And that's what you would normally do for takeoff. After takeoff, once I'm in the air and I pass Mach 0.35, the system will automatically select waypoint 1. It'll automatically select B1. And then as I overfly each waypoint, it will automatically cycle it. That will include pop-up points and target points. So in this case, B4, waypoint 4, is actually our target. You'll note that it's indicating B. The system still recognizes it as a normal waypoint. So while we're on the ground here, we've got a little bit of additional setup to do. At this time, we would define which waypoints should be targets. We can also define pop-ups. We can define time on target, and we can define our ingress point, the point from which we want to start accelerating and flying a bit faster. So let's do that. First, let's define our target waypoint. We can do that with master mode tactical. We can switch the system to input, and we simply enter 9 on the keypad and then select the waypoint we want to be a target. I'm going to press B4. B4 is now a target. If I switch back to output and back to actual position, if I press B4 now, you'll note that I get M4. It's now confirming to me that that is indeed a target. The others, B1, B2, B3 are still normal waypoints. B4 is now M4. And that's important for various weapon release programs and various other stuff that I won't cover right now. I also want a pop-up point for target point 4. Let's go back to B1 just now. If I switch myself to tactical mode and back to input, I can also enter a pop-up point using a 3-digit heading and a 2-digit distance in kilometers. So I've decided that I want to approach this target from a heading of 124 degrees from 10 kilometers away. So in tactical mode, in input, I can enter 1, 2, 4, 1, 0. That's confirmed on the display, and if I press B4, that will create the pop-up point for me. Okay, so now I'm going to put the system back into output. I'm going to return to actual position, and if I now press B4, I actually get U4, U indicating pop-up point. So it will first display the pop-up point. It would then automatically switch to M4, but I can manually do that by pressing B4 again, and it now displays M4. If I press B4 again, it goes back to the pop-up point. I'm going to press LS again to bring me back to that. So I've now defined a pop-up point and a target. Now let's think about time on target. The time on target functionality is controlled via the TEED master mode, TEED standing for time in Swedish. With TEED master mode selected, if I press LS, it will display the clock, so I can see the current time. It's 2-digit hour, 2-digit minute, 2-digit second. So it's currently almost 20 past 8. If I wanted to set a time on target, well actually before I do that, if I press any of the waypoints just now, it will either show the selected cruising speed or it will display a time on target if there is one. Other thing to note is that when I first switch into TEED, if there was a time on target defined, it would show me my current deviation. So it would show me if I was ahead of time or behind time. The fact that the display is blank means there is no time on target right now. So B1 waypoint, I'm expected to fly at Mach 0.45 because there's no time on target. So it's digits and then decimals, 2-digit decimal. B2 will be the same, 3, 4, 5. They all show Mach 0.45 by default. You can define an ingress point at which you intend to accelerate, and from that point forwards you will be at the accelerated speed until you reach a target point or another ingress point. It resets at those times. So if I'm in TEED mode and I go to input, if I enter something with 3 digits, it will interpret that as a Mach number. If I use all the digits, it will interpret it as a time on target. So let's say that I intend to accelerate from waypoint 2. I'm going to use waypoint 2 as my ingress, and I'm going to fly at Mach 0.95. So we're in input, we're in TEED, I'm going to enter 0, 9er, 5, 3 digits, and then I'm going to press B2. I've now assigned that. If I go back to output mode again, B1, 0.45, B2, 0.95, B3, it goes back to 0.45, and in B4 as well. These all just show that speed. I now want to enter a time on target, so I switch back to input mode, and I'm going to enter 0, 8, 3, 6, 0, 0, and press B4. I've now entered a time on target. If I go to output mode, you now see, with TEED selected in output mode, I have my deviation. We are currently 2 minutes and 20 seconds ahead of my flight plan. If there was a minus symbol as the first digit, that would be me behind by that amount of time. And again, I can click on the waypoints and I can either see my Mach numbers as intended, or if I select the target waypoint, so it's not displaying my time on target there. Interesting. However, it is set because I have a deviation time here. So it might be the case that it only displays that once I'm booted up. So that's how you do a time on target. You need to be in TEED, input mode, and enter a full 6-digit time on target, and select the waypoint. With that done, we're ready to take off, and I'll then demonstrate what this system looks like in the air. Okay, you rejoin me on the runway and we're ready to go. Let's select Navigational Master Mode. We can now see that we have a HUD image. LS is selected. Computer is in actual position mode and output. That means the push buttons will work, but we actually won't need those. We're going to rely on the auto switching. And you'll note that once I'm airborne, I will get B1 auto selected. So let's go ahead. We're going to do a Zone 2 afterburner takeoff. Okay, Zone 2 selected. Wait until we're at the right speed. I can't see my bars right now. I would need to change my head position, but we'll not worry about that too much right now. Okay, let's bring the nose up. We're aiming for the tops of those pitch bars, just like that. Gear up. And we should be passing Mach 0.35 any moment now, and then the system will switch into normal navigation and select B1. It's done so. Let's go ahead and turn, and we can see that we're too slow straight away based on that fin indicator. So let's go full afterburner, and let's see if we can get ourselves back on our time on target. May or may not be possible. I may have selected an impossible time on target setting, but we'll just see how that goes. The system wants me to fly at 500 meters. I'm actually going to choose to fly at something more like 150. So I'm going to get to 150 and tap the reference button. We've now reset that. I'll reset the HUD glass. Actually, I need it up a little bit. Let's adjust our head position here. That'll make it easier. Oh, actually, we're going too fast now. Note that the fin got disconnected. Let's slow it down. So, we're on B1, let's fly towards the very first waypoint and we'll see the automatic switching. Once we've seen that, you can rejoin me once I get to the pop-up position. But this is basically, actually I'll pause very quickly. We want to fly to put the reference dot inside the flight path marker. That means we're flying directly towards B1. We have the distance to B1 displayed here in kilometers as per this window. Yellow indicator on the central indicator is telling us the same thing, and also the yellow bars on the ADI are showing us heading and altitude that we want to fly. Let's come out of pause, trim the aircraft a little bit, and away we go. I would also have the option of turning on the hold autopilot, and it will now fly my currently kind of flown heading and altitude automatically. If I wanted to shift that altitude, I could actually use the pitch trim. And using the pitch trim, I can actually set a new reference altitude. You can see the bars move as I do that, which is quite handy. Fin is just about attaching to the body of the aircraft again, so that's pretty good. If I look down at the computer, if I put it back into TEED mode, we can see that I'm 40 seconds late at the current time. But that's pretty close. I think that's acceptable for now. So we'll overfly waypoint B1 at the selected speed, and we should see that auto switch. Coming up on 15 kilometers now. And in preparation, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the autopilot because I'll need to do a maneuver in just a moment. Flying very low. Note that I'm in radar altimeter here, using this switch. 10 kilometers. Fin is pretty much attached. Five kilometers. We actually only need to pass within about 3 kilometers, and the system will auto-switch, but it does it as the heading flips around from being in front of us. You'll see that in just a moment. That's us at about 3 kilometers now. Heading should start to shift any moment now. Oh, and we're reading as too slow again. Let's get a move on. Auto switch has occurred. You'll see it now indicates B2. I'm now too fast again. Let's maneuver. And we're now inbound B2. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to bring you back once we're at the pop-up point. Okay, you rejoin me now, approaching waypoint number 3. Once we overfly 3, we should get the switch to the pop-up point, and we'll fly towards that. You can see that my fin is almost correct, and because of the very high angles I'm having to fly here, I'm often actually referencing the ADI and not the HUD, because sometimes the HUD is not actually visible, depending upon how you're flying. We're doing pretty good. I think we're on flight plan and on time so far, and that's us just approaching waypoint 3. That's about 3 kilometers to go. I'm kind of, this terrain is very uneven, so using the radar altimeter is a little bit challenging, but you might use the pressure altimeter actually for some of these flights. Well, I wanted to maintain a set distance above the terrain. Okay, B3 is overflown. We now have pop-up point 4. So let's continue inbound. And once we overfly 4, we'll switch to the target. And that's when we would normally employ weapons, but we'll be covering that kind of thing in a later video. I'm actually going to ignore the time on target now, because otherwise it's going to take too long to get there. Let's fly at 0.95 as we intended. I obviously didn't set the time on target, taking that into account. Let's fly as the Viggen is intended to be fast. So, actually, one thing, very important thing to note here. You see that my steering indications on the HUD and on the ADI are centered and pointing me towards pop-up 4. Note that on the central indicator, however, it's actually indicating the heading to my target. This is a special mode. This only happens when you're in pop-up. So note that you should fly the ADI and the HUD, and you can use the central indicator as a reference so that you know where your current target is. I was intending to turn in a heading of 124, so once the yellow indicator swings around to about here, I should be expecting my turn. And then the system will switch to M4, and the distance will indicate to the target. Long to go now. Flying something approximating my chosen speed. About 9 kilometers to go. Oh, and actually it switched. It switched right there. Oh, I guess the distance was indicating to the target. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. The central indicator and the distance are actually indicating to the target, but you should fly the indications on your ADI and on the HUD. So I'm now target inbound. It would be at this stage I would have my weapons all set up and I would do a release, but I'm simply going to overfly the target and continue with the rest of my flight plan. Again, I can see here how much fuel I need to complete my flight plan and how much fuel I actually have. I've got plenty of fuel right now. So we'll be overflying the target any moment now. Okay, we're now back to B5. Let's maneuver towards that. I'm just going to go full speed now, so that you're not hanging around too long waiting for this. And because we added B6 to the flight plan, it will switch us to that one last. We have, in effect, extended the flight plan with that. Yeah, we're going fast. Oh, that Mach tuck is making me nose down a lot. Okay, overflown B5. We're now all the way around to B6. And roll out there. Short distance to go. We'll overfly B6 any moment now, and then we'll be at the end of the flight plan. That's the end of the flight plan, and L1 is automatically selected. We're now basically all set up to fly back to base and land the aircraft. Reference my landing tutorial for how to do that correctly, but that's what we would do next. So that's the whole process. We have, as I've demonstrated, normal waypoints, we've got target points, we've got mark points, we've got pop-up points, and you can designate your time on target, your ingress, all kinds of stuff using the CK37 computer. So, I hope you all enjoyed that. Thank you very much indeed for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and comment. It's a really big help for me and for the channel. Also, if you'd like to further support the channel, you have the option of joining Deephack's ground crew. Big shout out to those of you who've already done so. Your names are on screen now. Thank you ever so much. There are some small benefits. You get to join Deephack's ground crew Discord server, and we're also looking at, on occasion, doing flights together. So, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Ta-ta!